welcome to the Precision Depreciation webinar hosted by Aloft's Learning Library. My name is Carly Smith, and I'm on the partnerships team here at Aloft. Aloft is a technology company that builds solutions and education to empower informed real estate decisions. So we're going to talk a little bit about today's format. We'll be sharing a very detailed presentation about depreciation, and during the presentation, you can send us your questions via the Q&A at the bottom or left of your screen. You just click on that and you'll reach us. You'll see our team providing answers, and we may actually pull up during the presentation to share your question and the answer as part of it. We will be sure to answer all your questions, and we'll make the recording of this webinar available afterward to any registered attendee. So those who aren't able to attend will still get the recording. Let's meet our expert educator. Today's webinar is presented by Heather Sullivan. Heather is an AQB certified USPAP instructor and a member of the Appraisal Foundation's Appraisal Standards Board. She is Aloft's head of learning and development, has written several nationally recognized continuing education courses, and has taught appraisers all across the country. She is an enthusiastic and smiling advocate for appraisers and the appraisal profession. Heather, let's talk about depreciation.
Very excited to do this. This is one of my favorite topics because I think it's so important for appraisers. So we're going to show some methods and techniques today, but before we do, I just want to get a gauge on our audience and start with a little poll question. So my poll question to all of you is, how confident, I'm just going to launch this, how confident are you in your depreciation skills? And so you'll see it pop up on your screen. Hopefully, I see a number of you answering. So I'm going to go ahead and assume it's working, and we'll just give a little bit of time and then I'll flash the results so we can kind of understand where we're coming from today. All right. I think that's enough time. We got a pretty good sample of our audience. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share those results out to you. Are you all able to see the results?
Yes.
All right. We have a number that are not very confident. We have most that are somewhat confident. We have a few that are really confident. And then I'm sad to see that I didn't see any say very confident because I can prove it. That's really where I want to get you today. I think there is a science behind this, and there is a way to prove and defend your depreciation adjustments. So without further ado, I guess we'll just get started so we don't waste any valuable time, knowing that that's the goal and where we want to get today. So with this, we have a couple learning objectives. I always start every educational offering with some learning objectives so you know where we're headed. Our first one is we're going to debunk some common depreciation myths and misconceptions. We're going to build confidence in our ability to derive and support depreciation adjustments credibly. We are going to learn a new but familiar approach to mathematically calculate depreciation adjustments. And this is my overarching goal for everything. We're going to begin to build consistency and practice between appraisers. I mean, that's really where we need to strive, especially in this environment that we're in today, where everybody is able to compare us to our peers and what we did on previous reports. We really need to get to that point of consistency, and that, you know, there's no two completely different answers at the end of the day. So again, that's my overarching goal, and hopefully you guys see that as a need as well. So to begin, we got to stop saying we're not skilled enough to credibly determine depreciation in the cost approach. For years, I reviewed appraisal reports that had the cost approach completed only per the client's request. And within the comments, the appraiser would state that because the property is an older home and depreciation was estimated, the cost approach to value could not be relied upon, therefore deeming it not credible. We really need to wake up on this. Appraisers estimate depreciation all the time in the sales comparison approach on nearly every property we appraise, whether we realize it or not. And to say we don't do it credibly infers we're probably not competent to complete the assignment. So if you have this in your reports, please remove it and give yourself a little more credit. And this is why. So new home sales make up nearly 10% of the real estate market, and this percentage is likely even higher for non-sale related appraisal services. So which, there's an overwhelming percentage of homes that at least have some degree of physical depreciation. Therefore, we better know what we're doing when it comes to depreciation. Otherwise, it sounds like we're not competent to complete this assignment. And depreciation needs to be every appraiser's core competency because it's needed to produce credible appraisal results. In fact, we should be telling our clients that we specialize in depreciation and that they need us to be able to specialize in this and to use our services for this reason. So the good news is depreciation is a science. And don't think depreciation is unique to the real estate market only. It applies to everything that ages, deteriorates, or loses value. Other industries have figured out and learned to capitalize on this skill. Take Kelley Blue Book, for example. Isn't that just depreciation tables that are used to set market values for used cars? Dealerships, insurance companies, lenders, buyers, sellers, they all rely on and trust Kelley Blue Book. Isn't that just what we do, but for houses? And if you think it's hard to estimate a depreciated value on cars or homes, think about life insurance companies. They actually depreciate humans in a way quite similar. Quality sets life expectancy, health and well-being sets your effective age. And with that, you can determine a person's remaining life. It's crazy, don't get me wrong, but it's literally the same methodology, just using different data points. So I do have one more poll that we're going to get to right now just to gauge. Bear with me as I pull that up. All right. So what I'd like to know is what factors drive your depreciation calculation? And you can select all that apply. I'm loving this. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. So if you didn't get in there in time, I apologize, but just to keep things moving, here we go. I'm going to share the results. Now, do you guys all see that? Awesome. All right. So you can see the split about, it looks like almost all of them have 75+% usage. I am not shocked, but I did like that the human preferences and human perceptions are accounted for significantly less, only because I think this is where the misconceptions lie in how we value properties. So in the sales comparison approach, it's all about human preferences and perceptions on what they're willing to pay for and not willing to pay for. And when we think about the cost approach, we're more thinking of physical depreciation, but there is also this element of external and functional depreciation that really takes into consideration, I get what you have there, but I'm not willing to pay for it, even though it's brand new or, you like it, it's really not something that I'm willing to pay for. And so we have these other buckets that really are bringing that cost to build down to the market value based off of the market's reaction to all the improvements on the site. So I do want this to be one of those learning experiences where, in fact, because we're gauging market reaction, there is an element of human preferences and perceptions that go into people's buying decisions. You guys nailed all the other ones where there's some, I see the actual age is a little bit lower. That's usually only comes into play on new construction where, they haven't made any updates to extend that, effective age, or to, improve the property so that actual age doesn't really represent the wear and tear. So all these have some element of consideration when you're determining depreciation, overall depreciation of a property. And it's good just to kind of keep those in mind as we're going through this session, because you'll see them pop up in various definitions and considerations. So we'll let it go there, but ultimately there's a lot that goes into depreciation, but that's not something that should scare us. I'm going to stop sharing there, move that off to the side. So let's go over the definition of depreciation. It's a loss in value from any cause, any cause. So that's where, if somebody's preference is not to pay for it, that comes into play, those human preferences into that market reaction. The other definition is the difference between the cost of an improvement on the effective date of the appraisal and the market value of the improvement on that same day. So think about that for a minute. That is our cost approach. If we take into consideration what it costs to build, what the land value is, and understand that, hey, it only sold for this, so that difference to make that math work is your depreciation. And that's really where we're going to focus a lot today. So that's where it comes into your physical, functional, and external adjustments. So as we go through that, I'm going to come up with, I think, some important definitions and distinctions. And these all come from the Dictionary of Real Estate Appraisal, the 6th edition from the Institute. So I really recommend, if you don't have this book in your library, that y'all go out and make sure you have it, because a lot of the definitions are just the mathematical equations that we need to perform these types of analysis. So it's really helpful when you're trying to explain or support something that you did to just throw in that definition. So when you look at it, physical deterioration, it's an impairment of condition, a cause of depreciation that reflects the loss in value due to wear and tear, disintegration, use and service, and the actions of the elements. So this is anytime a property is not worth as much because of wear and tear or its current condition of the property versus what it would be worth if it was new. Functional obsolescence, this is the impairment of functional capacity of an improvement according to market tastes and standards. Is that not our human perceptions and preferences coming right into that functional obsolescence definition? I think it is. External, a diminution of value caused by negative external influences and generally incurable on the part of the owner, landlord, or tenant. The external influence may be either temporary or permanent. And we had a great discussion in our loft appraiser community the other day, because I was starting to see external obsolescence come onto the cost approach. And I had never seen that before. I was a reviewer for 15 years, and I saw a lot of properties, high end, low end, you name it, across the country. I've reviewed a ton of appraisals. And in all those years of appraising or reviewing, I only saw one property, and it actually was in my area on Mercer Island, that had an external obsolescence adjustment. And so I know it's not common, and just recently I saw it show up twice in my day-to-day where in fact it wasn't probably applied correctly because they were using it to reflect depreciation in the site for some external factor, but it really wasn't related to the improvements. And so that's where we got to be really careful on how we tie those together. The cost approach and the sales comparison approach are intrinsically related. Everything that you consider in the cost approach, you're going to consider on your sales comparison grid. And those numbers actually have to be consistent and line up with one another, because at the end of the day, each one of those approaches are indicating your market value. And if they both indicate market value, then by definition, they both have to equal each other. So if you're saying in the cost approach that there's been $100,000 worth of physical depreciation, that's the same amount of depreciation in your sales comparison. And so if you have a comparable that only has $50,000 worth of physical depreciation, you need to make a $50,000 adjustment to make that equal to the subject's 100,000. So you see how those relate? This kind of hopefully helps shows it, but depreciation can be throughout every feature item on the sales comparison approach, or it can show up in kind of grouped areas. A lot of times the best one it always shows up is in your sale price. Guess what? If you have some sort of depreciation, you're not selling for what it would have been if it was something that was high, desirable to the market. Everybody wanted it brand new. Nothing's wrong with it. It's exactly what the ideal improvement would be today. If it's not that, then you're going to see all those little nuances reflected in that sale price. And then, as I just mentioned, physical condition deterioration is really your condition adjustment on the sales comparison grid. And if you're not making that relation, you really need to, because they should be one and the same. And then functional utility, we see it. We have a line for functional utility. We hardly ever use it. A lot of times when you think about functional utility and obsolescence, it's more about, over improvements or under improvements, or I built something, I built the bathroom right off the kitchen and there's no door. I don't know. There's all kinds of weird things we see, right? But realistically, that can either, if it's an over improvement or an under improvement, you might see that somewhere in your GLA adjustment or something like that. But ideally, it just has to be accounted for somewhere. If you're recognizing it in the cost approach, you have to recognize it on the sales comparison grid. So I came up with a couple of different methods for depreciation techniques. I definitely, as I'm going through those, if you use a different one, will you make sure to type that into the Q&A section so that we can kind of discuss that? There are different applications for them, and everyone kind of has a little bit different meaning, but ultimately try to accomplish the same thing. So I'll start with straight line method. And the straight line method in appraisal is the calculation of depreciation as a constant annual amount over a estimated useful life of the property. So it's got 60 years of economic life. It's 10 years old. 10 divided by 60, that's my number. That's the percentage of depreciation. We all know that doesn't always work in a consistent way. Like, people start making updates and renovations, and some components didn't wear as much as they should have if they had a larger family in there, and it's just, so you have different timing of things. And that's really where that age life method comes in, because this, instead of focusing on the actual age, it focuses on the effective age of an improvement, taking a step back and saying, I get what the year built is, but this is actually the actual condition of the home as it relates to its condition. So this definition is the method of estimating depreciation in which the ratio between the effective age of a building and its total economic life is applied to the current cost of the improvements to obtain a lump sum deduction. What does that sound like? So we have the current cost of the improvements multiplied by the effective age compared to the economic life. That's just our cost approach, guys. I know it doesn't talk about the land, but we don't depreciate the land, right? Market trends say, whether the land is going up or down, but to actually depreciate the land in the cost approach, that's all baked into our site value. We're not actually doing that in those 3 boxes within the cost approach. The other method that we use a lot of times, and people have different names for this, but it's the life cycle method. This is where you depreciate individual building components based on their contribution to the overall cost and its life expectancy. So this is where we start getting into some of those life cycle tables that you'll see in the Marshall and Swift cost handbook. And by the way, if you guys do have access to that, there's an entire chapter in the Marshall and Swift handbook that dives really deeply into depreciation and their tables and how it's calculated. And I can tell you when I read it for the first time, and yes, I did read it only because I was helping to design the course for the book, but it was like eye-opening to me. It was like a light bulb moment. So if you have it, make sure you read it. We don't always take the time, but it is a wealth of information in there. And it does talk about the various methods, straight line, age life, life cycle. It provides tables and estimates, and it allows you to, take into consideration quality of construction into your economic life and the condition as it relates to not just the actual age, but to the overall effective age of the property. So really good read if you like to geek out about that kind of stuff. But even if you don't, I think it's an important skill that we should all really feel comfortable in. So take a moment. The last one, oh, I should have said those two in the middle is really extended life theory. Again, it's focusing on the fact that actual age doesn't always represent our effective age. And so if we're doing improvements to the property, which, give any property 10 or 15 years, you're having to make updates and at least paint, carpeting, and those short-term items. But you start in the 20 years, you start seeing new windows and roof and all these other things that really extend the life when we do make those upgrades. So make sure that's why we usually stick to those two methods, some sort of age life or life cycle method instead of using a straight line depreciation. But again, straight line comes into play if the house is less than 10 years old, it's never been improved, and it's got typical wear and tear. We can absolutely use that method. And then this last one is my favorite one because this is the one that allows you to extract the depreciation from each property so you know exactly how much that property has depreciated. And so this is the one where I said, and you can prove it, the confidence level comes up. Remember at the beginning, I asked that whole question about how confident are you in your depreciation adjustments. When you use the extraction method, you're actually extracting the actual depreciation for that property. And so because you're able to do that, you're able to prove what that is, and it makes your confidence in that adjustment go way up. And so that's really one of the methods we're going to cover today, just so that you gain that confidence in this methodology. But again, it's just a way of saying, I get it, the land's worth this, it costs this much to build, but it only sold for this. So that whatever makes that, price difference work between what it actually costs versus what it sold for, that's your depreciation. That's your extracted depreciated value. So I have one more poll question. Well, actually, I think I might have two. I lied to y'all. But I'm going to go ahead and launch this because I want to know what methods. Oh, I got to come back to a slide. I got excited. I want to know which depreciation techniques you use most.
Heather, I'm being quiet over here because panelists can't vote.
Oh, well, you can give us a shout out, Carly,
Yeah.
anytime. Put you on the spot.
Put me on the spot there and go with A, B, C, and B, D.
And for all of you that don't know Carly very well, she's our honorary appraiser. She is learning the language, and I can tell you she probably would do a pretty good job answering these questions. All right.
A lot. Let's see what our results look like.
Okay. Y'all see that? So we used a straight line about 13% of the time, which, hey, kind of makes sense when we remember our statistic about 10% are new homes. And so in those those homes that are newer, you probably a straight line method because they've only depreciated. They haven't been updated or anything to like make that effective age more important. So that kind of makes sense with, the overall. I see no life cycle. And hey, I get it. That one takes a lot more work. It, I don't know if you guys have seen the table in the Marshall and Swift, but it's like up this, down this, over here. It's like you really have to know all the different components of the property and when they were updated and what the economic life of each of those components are. So it's one that if we need to get to dive deep, we have it in our toolbox, but for all intents and purposes, it's probably for the value add to the accuracy of our reports. It probably isn't necessary because again, it's the buyer's reaction to the property's condition and improvements that we're trying to gauge. And I can promise you they're not doing all that math. So only use that when you need it. But most are using the age life method or the extraction method, which makes me happy. Those are the two I use the most as well. And we're going to kind of show a play off of those today so that you feel even more comfortable with those two. And I didn't see anybody select other, so I guess that's a pat on my shoulder to know that I captured most of what we're doing out there. If you are using something else, I would love to know about it, just because again, these types of things fascinate me, and I think there's a lot of fun in applying some of these techniques and how people do it. So definitely share it if you have a different method. All right. I did get excited and I jumped ahead. So I have this slide that I do want to cover real quick just because it's some more terms. And again, I think it's really important to understand the definitions of things. But in economic life, that's the period over which improvements to the real estate contribute to the improvements to real estate contribute to the property. So if you have a property that has a 60-year economic life, that a lot of times those tables are gauged. There's actual tables and studies that have been performed to make that more of a science. If you think about, hey, your roof has a 25-year warranty, it's because they've done a lot of testing to see how long that roof is going to last. So same with economic life. They've done a lot of testing to see how long components and improvements last without any being touched at all. And that's where that economic life comes from. Now, there's another component of economic life that is kind of the useful life of it. So even if you have something sitting there, this kind of comes into the economic or the external side of things. You can have something that is perfectly usable, but because its usefulness, like say you have a single family and they changed the zoning to high density and now everybody wants to put a multifamily on there. Well, that economic life of the single family home might have been shortened because somebody buying the property is going to tear it down sooner than it's useful, like to sooner than it would like have lasted if you wanted to live in it as a residence. They're going to tear it down and put a multifamily house on that lot. So its useful life might have been shortened a little bit. Effective age, that's the age of the property that is based on the amount of observed deterioration and obsolescence it has sustained, which may be different from its chronological age. That's we've kind of been discussing quite a bit. And then remaining economic life, the estimated period over which estimating improvements are expected to contribute economically to the property, and the other definition is an estimate of the number of years remaining in the economic life of a structure or structural components as of the effective date of the appraisal. All right. So hopefully we all have a pretty good understanding of those. And again, if you have any questions, make sure you pull up your definitions book and have that handy as you're going through some of these analysis. Okay, so before I jump into this slide and some of the actual math behind things, I did want to stop and see if we had any questions or comments? Okay. All
All
right.
clear, but we're
All
ready. If
clear.
anybody has questions, and it won't show to
Yes.
everybody. It'll just come to us, so don't be nervous if you have a question. We've got some non-honorary appraisers who are available to answer those questions.
Well, and Beth Ann comes to us with a large breadth of knowledge and experience in the appraisal world. She has an incredible background and knows just about everything. I learn something from her every day. So don't be afraid to send us your appraisal questions.
Please don't, because I'm continuously learning from Heather and could listen about depreciation from Heather every day because I learned something.
Oh, that's funny. All right, let's start with age life method. This is the method that most of us use commonly. So it's a method of estimating depreciation in which the ratio between the effective age of the building and its total economic life is applied to the current cost of the improvements to obtain a lump sum deduction. So if you see that equation on the slide, this is the definition. So it's the ratio between effective age and economic life. So you would take your economic or effective age, you divide it by your economic life, and then you'd apply it to your replacement cost new. And now replacement cost new, that's just the cost approach from the dwelling. And that's why I keep showing you the cost approach, because you're familiar with this. It's all something that we're super familiar with. And I use this so it helps you visualize where the numbers come from. But to do this, we estimated the effective age to be 10 years old on this property. We determined that the economic life was 60 years. Again, there's tables for stuff like that to help us, consider the quality of an improvement as it will, its effective life, how that changes. And then that third component is that replacement cost new, which you can see right there on the slide is 475,958. So if we do that math, and I actually encourage you all, I've had this calculator for like 25 years and it's gross, but if you have one like it, you don't need the HP 12 or anything like that. Go ahead and do the math along with me on some of these, because I think, for one, I'm going to ask you in a minute for some of these answers, but I feel like doing the motions, going through it and seeing where those numbers come from will help you actually, when you get out and start doing this on every assignment, you'll start easily recognizing where those numbers come from. So here we have 79,326. And if you look at how this shakes up on the page, so we have a site value of 570,000. We have an overall value of 966,632. So if we take that site value from that sale price, it only leaves us with a value for the improvements, all things considered, of 396,632. So within that 396,632, there's a component of, hey, it would take this amount of money to build it, but it's not worth that. So it would cost $475,000 to build it, but it's only worth $396,000, right? So that difference in those two numbers is your depreciation. Now we got to it by saying, hey, there's an effective age of 10 years. It has an economic life of 60 years. And if we take that percentage, which is like 1.33%, so about 13%, multiply that by the replacement cost, then we get 79,000. So you can get there either way. Sometimes I feel like the challenge is we're not always feeling comfortable estimating the effective age and the economic life. Now, I do want to set your mind at ease that, especially with economic life, again, there's a true science behind it. if you don't have a table that helps you recognize how quality relates to economic life, make sure you do it. Make sure you get one. Manufactured homes have a shorter economic life. Usually it's like 45 to 55. Now that's changing with some of the, new manufactured homes that are on the market, the choice homes or Advantage, where they're a lot more similar to stick built. But again, if you're using economic life, don't just always use 60 years. Use an economic life that makes sense with your improvements. If you're doing high quality, high end stuff with, really substantially superior quality of construction, you might see 65, 75, 80 years as your economic life. But again, there's a lot of science behind it. They've done studies to see, how long these buildings and improvements and the components are going to last. You can actually do some research and get that number pretty easily. Effective age, it's more of an estimate. It even says it right in the definition. The thing to think about effective age is it's helped me to think of it as a percentage. So if you have a 10-year effective age, you're looking at about 13% of the improvements have depreciated, meaning that only 87% is remaining. If you think your improvements have been depreciated 50%, you're looking at a 30-year effective age over a 60-year life. So you can kind of start whittling down and getting a pretty close number on that when you just think of, okay, if it's a 25-year-old home, it's had some improvements. So I know 25 isn't the number. I know it's not new. It probably, better represents a 10-year-old house, then that's your effective age. So it is a little bit subjective, but because of the information you have and how many homes you've been in, I mean, if you think about appraisers and all the houses we've been in, we got a pretty good gauge on, what styles represent what age and when people update things and what people are okay with. We can really start analyzing the effective age of a house pretty accurately. Now, all right, all that aside, we can still show you how to prove it using the extraction method. And then we can tell you what that effective age is. So the extraction method is a method of estimating depreciation in which the site value of the replacement cost new of the improvements on an improved property is calculated and deducted from the total sale price to arrive at the estimated amount of depreciation. And so again, you're going to see, if you don't already love this equation, this should be your favorite equation for all things appraisal, because it really is versatile. The more you dive into each one of those things, there's math behind each aspect of it. So you can really get some good numbers. So here it's just the sale price minus the site value minus the replacement cost new. And whatever is left, that's your depreciation. But it's important to recognize that is your physical, functional, and external. It's a lump sum depreciation when you use that. Now we can dive into each one of those. Like, we know now how to calculate physical depreciation with the age life method or the life cycle. Functional, we can calculate that because if you think about functional obsolescence, if you were to construct the property, do a reproduction cost on the property, like this is how much it would take to reproduce whatever they have there currently, versus a replacement cost, which considers, typical buyers' design preferences and standards today. That replacement cost takes out your functional obsolescence, because you're saying, I get whatever's going on with this property is this, but if I were to build a a replacement for this without all that stuff, it would be this number. So a lot of times your functional obsolescence is just the difference between reproduction cost versus replacement cost. And then external is everything in between that's outside of your control. So that's just the remainder of, hey, I sold for this, I get it cost this much to build, but nobody's paying that. So here's your number. So again, we can really dive into those numbers. We can get an exact depreciation number, and then we can work to break that down into all the different components of physical, functional, and external.
Hey, Heather, on that one, what immediately jumps to mind is what do you do on a refinance when you don't have a sale price?
Well, so this is on your comparables. That's a great question. You can still do it on your subject, but I think in order to get a gauge of what your comparable properties are depreciating to better estimate your subject, I would do this approach on my comparables. I would extract the site value, estimate the subject site value, and then it's that difference again between the market value, your estimated market value for the subject, and the cost of the improvements plus the land.
Right.
So this approach, oh, sorry, you guys. My neighborhood dog is alarming the troops.
Can't hear it.
You can't hear him.
You're good. Okay.
Startled me. So yeah, where this approach has the most value is when we're applying it to an actual sale to extract the depreciation, and from there we can calculate what the effective age. So if you have a similar property that you think has a similar effective age as the subject, you could extract its total depreciation and then use that total depreciation to determine the effective age. It kind of backs in, and then you would apply that effective age in your age life method to the subject.
It makes so much sense. Thank you. We do have one question.
Okay.
We have a question about what are you using where you're getting the life estimates for the different qualities of dwellings? Like you talked about the manufactured homes. What resource are you using?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different like you can come about it a lot of different ways. I personally have always used the Marshall and Swift, and they have tables in their book. But you could also go to builder websites where it has warranties if you wanted to do the components. And I've seen some really fancy Excel calculators that basically, take the percentage of the building. So it's like 3% of the building is windows, and windows have an life expectancy of this. And so they do a whole mathematically, like giving equal weight to everything to come up with that, typical life, economic life. So there's a lot of research done and a lot of numbers that are a lot of providers that just give you that range. But usually on a stick-built home, it's usually 60 to 75 years. If it's really low quality, probably 55. Manufactured homes I've seen anywhere from 45 to 55. And then and you know what? You'll start to, you can even back into that number with the extraction method, because you'll know, okay, I have a 10-year-old home. Its actual age is this, and then whatever number makes that math work. So let me show you some of that.
Yep.
Because we're gonna show how you can reverse engineer this equation to come up with effective age and economic life.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, so here we have an example. This is the one we just did, but this time we're gonna, I say back into it, but we're going to do the extraction method. So we know that this property's sale price, and we're going to pretend this is a sale. I just wanted to show you how the math works both ways, either estimating age life, come up with the effective age and the depreciation number, or using the extraction method and reverse engineering it to come up with the effective age. So here we have a sale price of $966,632. We have a site value of $570,000. And then we know it costs $475,958 to build. And so basically, just like we did before, that leaves us with that $79,000. That's our lump sum depreciation. Now, we don't know whether that's functional or external or physical at this point, but let's pretend it's physical. So this would go right into that bucket. But now that we know that, so we just said that that is the number that makes this math work, we can actually figure out what the effective age is by taking the depreciation divided by that replacement cost new, multiplying it by the economic life, and it'll come up with that effective age. And I know that sounds like a lot of math, but it's all the same numbers. We're just switching them around and solving for different things. So this is like Algebra 101. If you know the answer to all but one variable, you set that variable equal to the others, and that's your result. So here in this situation, we know depreciation 79,326. We know that the replacement cost new is 475,000. So if we take that 79 divided by the 475,000, and we know the economic life is 60, we get that 10-year effective age. So this is where a lot of math, obviously, but the more you get comfortable with it, the easier it is. And honestly, it's just one of those things that if you just look at the numbers on the cost approach, you can kind of just see it pop out where it's like, if it's not 475, and it's actually 396, then it's that 79,000 that makes the math work. So you can kind of just do it that way as well. And that's truly your extraction method. So let's get our calculators out, and let's start with this property. We have an effective age of 10, an economic life of 60, and using this technique, we want to determine the functional depreciation. So let's start with physical depreciation and get that out of the way. So if we know the the effective age is 10 and the economic life is 60, we're going to take 10 divided by 60, and we're going to get that 13.33% depreciation, right? We're going to take that 13%, we're going to multiply it by our 475,958 because that's the cost new of the improvements. And we're going to get 79,326. Now, this property sold for less than the last property. It sold at 885,000 instead of the 966,000. So our first clue is this loss in value, right? So now what makes that math work? If we have 79,000 of physical depreciation and we still have to get to that 88,000 or 885,000, there's still more not accounted for. So what is that number? And so you can see now with this equation, it's the same thing, but now instead of just one depreciation factor, we've broken that into physical and functional depreciation, and we're solving for functional. So we're going to take the sale price minus the site value minus the replacement cost new. We're going to add back in that physical depreciation to get now the difference in value is this 81,632. And you'll know that that's right because when you take 475,000 and you take away 79,000 and 81,000, you get this improvement value. This is the contributory value of your improvements. And this is the only number that works to get to this sale price when you add it to 570. So you know the land is worth 570,000 and you know it sold for 885,000. So those improvements have to be worth $315,000. And if it costs $475,000 to build, you got about $160,000 of depreciation that you have to either apply to physical, functional, or external. Does that make sense?
Heather, can we just do a quick clarification? I think you might have said 13%, but it's actually the 16.6% when you take
Oh,
divided by the 60. I just want to clarify for the group.
thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I was trying to do that in my head.
I mean,
This is why I have my calculator.
Get that calculator out. So yes.
Thank you, 16.666.
Steve.
Yes. Steve, you're a rock star. My goodness. So I keep that calculator around. Yes,
So many numbers.
16.66. Yes. So I love that you fact checked me. Please keep doing that. That means you got your calculator out there. You guys are awesome. Okay, let's do this again, but let's now go for, now the property is selling at $871,000. So it's declined a little bit. Now we have a property with an effective age of 22 years, same economic life of 60 years. So with that, let's calculate physical depreciation first and then figure out how much external obsolescence. Because remember, last time it sold, let's see what it sold for last time. I'm just going to back up. It sold for $885,000. So we have the same improvements. We have an older improvement now with an effective age of 22 an effective age of 22 years. So we have a little bit different math, but let's figure out first what the physical is, and then we'll work on external. So here's the equation for external, but before we do that, let's take the 22 years divided by 60. Let's keep me honest. We are dealing with about 36.6% depreciation. We're going to multiply that by the 475,958. And you'll see we get about $174,518 worth of depreciation, physical depreciation. Now let's see what that economic is. So for the economic or external obsolescence, you're going to take the sale price minus the site value minus the replacement cost new, and you're going to add back in the depreciation, physical depreciation, to set that equal to only account for external obsolescence. And so when you do that, 871,450 minus 570 minus 475,958 plus that 174,518. And that only leaves $10. So is there external obsolescence on this one? No. We just proved that we thought maybe the major employment center went out of business and we're like, oh, that has to have an impact on things, right? It has to affect the overall use of this property. And this just proved that there is no external obsolescence on this one, that in fact, you just have a really dated house. All right, one more because we're getting close to the end of the hour. So I'm going to skip this one just to make sure we get through all the content, but this is just the same thing. Only this time we determined there was $51,000 worth of obsolescence. All right. So the reason we went through all this, because I know a lot of appraisers don't use the cost approach as much as I do. The reason we went through all this is because really what we're trying to accomplish is our adjustments on the sales comparison grid. And so, surprise, the math we just did, all we're going to do is take the difference between those and we're going to come up with that difference in value for our adjustment. So here you'll see that same cost approach because that's familiar to us all. But what you'll see is there's a physical depreciation for both of these properties. And what that difference is between those, that's your condition adjustment on the sales comparison grid. So if the subject depreciated 116,000, that's the wear and tear, the market's reaction to the current condition, and comp 1 had 174,000, then you got to bring comp 1 up 57,000 to bring it to the subject's $116,000 depreciation. So we're going to make a $57,000 adjustment. And now you see that I have all the other adjustments filled out on here. If you happen to miss the last webinar when I broke down the paired cost method so that you could see how all of those adjustments are derived, we have that recording on our website, and you can go back through it because it actually goes each adjustment by each adjustment to calculate those and show you a really slick way to do that. Now, this is the paired cost method because we went cost for cost and then depreciated it as a lump sum. The depreciated cost method, same results, but what we're doing here is we're basically saying, all right, we're not going to make a lump sum condition adjustment. We're going to actually make our adjustments based off of the contributory value of each feature. So we got to depreciate each feature first. And that's why you see those lines all move up, because what you'll see is these numbers, even though it's all the same improvements and same depreciation, here you'll see we have 314,000, 111,000 for basement. When you get to this screen, we've depreciated it. And so now instead of that 116,000, it's now 0 because your dwelling is 236,000 and 83,000. So we've depreciated each one of those factors. We took 25% off of everything on the top and 42% off of everything on the bottom. And so now what you'll see is those adjustments have changed, but we're not going to make a condition adjustment. And that's where we get a little bit confused, I think. A lot of times we say we're making adjustments based off of the contributory value of each feature, but lo and behold, we also have a condition adjustment on the grid, which means we just double adjusted. And you'll know you did because here's what the math looks like as you compare the two methods. So paired cost is in the middle, and then depreciated cost is on the far right. What you'll see is the net adjustments are the same, but condition, now there is no condition adjustment. And then, so we do a lump sum condition adjustment for paired cost, but because we depreciated everything before we did the comparison, we have a 0 adjustment for condition. So again, they all net out to the same. As appraisers, we need to recognize whether we already accounted for condition or we need to account for a condition. I tend to go with the paired cost method because our clients expect to see a condition adjustment. When you're saying this one has better condition than that, but you leave it blank, they come back to you with a correction and say, hey, you forgot to put this condition adjustment in. And it becomes a lot more difficult to explain things when you depreciate each one separately first, because sometimes your adjustments, and I'll show you how that works on the grid, sometimes your adjustments are a little bit inverted. So again, we're not going to have a condition adjustment, but here you'll see on one approach, there's a negative $39,000 or $3,924 for the paired cost. But in the depreciated cost, it's a positive $3,337 adjustment. So sometimes those adjustments start getting inverted when there's a significant difference in depreciation between properties, because now we're depreciating one more than the other. But again, at the end, it's all 109,000 net adjustments. So that's why we love to have multiple approaches as long as we understand them all very correctly. So here I'm going to ask one more question, and then we are just about done. So I appreciate it.
Right at time. We do have a couple of questions too while you're pulling questions. Yeah.
Okay, I'll put the poll on there and we can ask questions, and then we'll be.
And actually, I think Beth Ann might have answered one of them. Did you already grab that one? Okay.
I grabbed it.
The other one, very critical, our website URL, which we will share to you as well, is just alofappraisal.com.
Okay, well, that wasn't a question for me. Yeah, I'm just
Well, there
even.
was one there, but Beth Ann
Okay.
snagged it.
Oh,
So
Beth Ann grabbed it.
In
Okay.
the interest of
glory.
time, I went ahead and just
You
grabbed it
are a
so we could
rock
get through
star.
this. I didn't want
Okay.
to steal away from the presentation.
Oh, and like I said, this is basically the last slide. So the question is, which adjustment approach do you use most, whether it's paired cost or depreciated cost? And so it looks like we have quite a few answering that still. But in the essence of time, and said, oh, I didn't click fast enough. It was a dead heat. I tried to stop it when it was 50-50.
Awesome.
But so right now we have more lump sum than depreciated cost. Or yeah.
Yep.
You guys can all see that. Okay. So I use them both. Don't interchange them. Use one or the other, because if you start mixing and matching, you might get double adjustments. But definitely make sure you understand how everything is being applied and really think through whether you're accounting for everything or if you could possibly be double adjusting when you start diving into those, especially when you start adding other methods and techniques, how those numbers either already reflect the depreciated cost or if they hold true to the cost, the construction cost. So with that, I think we got a lot done in 1 hour. So we debunked some common appraisal myths and misconceptions. We built some confidence in our ability to derive and support depreciation adjustments. Guys, we got this. This is our specialty, truly. We learned a new but familiar approach to mathematically calculate market-based adjustments. And then hopefully this is just the start building consistency between appraisers and appraisal services. So thank you all for joining. I'm going to hand it over to Carly to close us out.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everyone for going a little over time with us. We appreciate it. And thank you, Heather. I know I just learned a lot and I'm sure everyone else did too. As you said, depreciation is a required skill and an art for appraisers. We do have another great way to learn and share your knowledge. Join our Aloft Appraiser community on Facebook. All you have to do, if you have a Facebook account, go in and type in Aloft Appraiser community. It is, you would ask to join, so it is a community. Constructive, positive feedback is what we're looking for, and then we share a lot there. Visit that page and ask to join. You'll see some familiar faces administering the site, and it's a great place for encouragement, education, and exploring. As a technology company, Aloft does bring solutions to the appraisal community. We do have one that makes the precise depreciation that you just saw accessible, manages the calculations, and incorporates actual cost and market data. You'll want to check out Aloft's Appraiser Toolkit. Right now, Toolkit is free to access for the rest of the year and maybe even a little longer. And we are scheduling sign-up sessions. So just go to aloftappraisal.com and find out more there. If we haven't already answered your question, we will before the end of today. And we do want you to know that we'll host additional webinars with your toolkit sign up. You can see all those upcoming webinars, site extraction, best practices for commentary, just a few sneak peeks there. And again, that's all at aloftappraisal.com. This is being recorded, and the last one was as well, and those are on our toolkit link. Once you join in there, you have access to those. So we want to thank everyone for joining us, and happy depreciationing. Go with depreciationing, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Great stuff.